So please allow me to introduce our folks who are conducting the fireside chat. Jason Goldwater is President and COO for Laurel Health Advisors and will be facilitating our fireside chat with Dr. Michael Kapp, CEO and CEO of Diveplane Corporation. This is what I get for trying to read off of my phone. Which develops transformative technology that keeps the humanity in AI. Before co-founding Diveplane, Mike had a legendary career in the video game industry as president of Epic Games, makers of blockbusters Fortnite and thank you. Fortnite.
Bob,
okay,
my
I have an
son
appointment. I have an eye appointment next Saturday, I promise.
Bob, my
Gears of War.
15-year-old is very disappointed in you right now.
Fortnite.
Largest entertainment property.
Have a good session,
in the
guys.
world. It's bigger than Marvel. It's bigger than the Avengers. No, nothing. Okay, that's fine.
Well, so thank you,
My mom
Bob.
doesn't care either, dude. It's fine.
Thanks, Bob. So just a little context before we get started. So about 5 weeks ago, I get an email from Kathy at 1:45 a.m. where normal people are sleeping saying, Jason, I got Mike Capps that's going to do the closing keynote, who unfortunately, sorry, Mike, I didn't know who you were. And she said, and I need a real data nerd to do the interview. You're the geekiest person I know. Will you please do it? Say yes. Thanks, Kathy. Right. Anyway, okay, right. So my 15-year-old son does not know what I do for a living. He just wants his Chick-fil-A every Saturday morning. And he doesn't think that I'm cool because he's 15. But when I told him I'm interviewing the former CEO of Epic Games, who makes Fortnite, which he played religiously for years, suddenly I got cool. And last night, he texted me, please ask him 2 questions before you begin the interview. So in Fortnite, Mike, when are you bringing Kevin the Giant Purple Cube back? And why does the Loot Lake have the worst loot in the history of video gaming?
Got it.
And mind you, he's charging me $50 to ask you these questions.
Well, so the first one, I wish I could tell him, but I cannot. We don't trust him with that information. And then the second one, we really like messing with our players. I think that's crucial. You think of it as an entertainment product, but it's more than that. It's an entire relationship where some days we love them and some days we hate them.
I got
Just
it.
like some days he loves to play the game and some days he calls it, what was it, a loot failure? Exactly. So it's a hard relationship. It's complicated, that's all.
Well, with that in mind, so Mike, I have gotten to know you, and obviously Bob needs a refresher course. So why don't you introduce yourself and really tell us how you got involved in AI?
Sure. Well, that's a big old question. Hey, everybody. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it. This looks like a lot of fun. It's very weird to have everyone come in person for a telehealth conference, but I'm not gonna judge you. That's cool. Whatever. I was like, can I zoom in? Like, oh, no, there's no reimbursement for that. I'm like, okay, fine. Friggin' state government. Okay, so my background is large-scale virtual reality. So I was doing like surgery telehealth in VR back in the mid-90s. It wasn't legal then either. And then got into video games through military simulation. I was a professor for a little while, went sideways because there was a lot more money in that than working for the Navy. And built the company up from about 20 people to about 1,000 worldwide. Had a ton of fun doing it. And it's really neat to make video games where people meet and then get married. And it's pretty cool to have every kid in the world know dances because my friend Jay did a dance in a room and we put a video camera on him and then turned it into the little character. And now, like, the NFL pays us to put jerseys in the game, and John Wick pays us to have Kino in the game. And it's weird, but, because the NFL needs exposure. Literally, that's why they pay us. Because it's that big. I assume not everyone here is playing Fortnite religiously, but I'll just say that the average spend is $80 a month for the player base, and that Fortnite hours played last year, if you treated those people as full-time employees of the Fortnite company, does that make sense? Like 40-hour work weeks, it's equivalent to the top 10 employers in the United States combined. It includes the U.S. government and Walmart and Ford, like all the way down, right? So it's a lot of time that's invested. It's not just 300 million players, but it's 300 million players who spend more time doing that than watching television or spending time on their phone. In fact, they're playing on their phones. So it's really, really big. It's weird. I left Epic just as it was beginning. I was very lucky to be part of the design team and run that product for a while. And I greenlit it and helped name it and all that cool stuff. And then I went away to go have children and be a productive dad. So I basically unretired, as one does when one retires at 40. I highly recommend it. Take some time and then unretire. Everyone should do that. I don't know why you don't. And I wanted to do something really impactful. And I made a list of things that were worth me leaving the house in the morning and not taking my kids to school. And it had to be pretty big because I was lucky to be financially secure. And that list included one that ended up becoming what I do every day all the time now, which is black box AI. And this is so much easier to explain to you now what black box AI is if you're not an AI. It used to be I'd have to talk about how no one really knows how it works and you can't trust it, and should we be using AI to make decisions like who gets parole? Of course we shouldn't. What if the parole system is racially biased? Hint, it is. But what if we're automating that at scale? Yes, we are. These are all terrible things, and nobody wants that. But now there's ChatGPT. So the front page of the newspaper has a bot that is telling the writer from the Wall Street Journal, you should leave your wife, right? For me. Right? And this is a system that people are using right now to write memos and to do legal opinions and to build companies around. And it is a wonderful, powerful tool for writing a thank you note to your grandma. It's really good for that. But it's terrible for asking how much Tylenol should I give my 18-month-old toddler, because it might say 30 grams, right? And nobody knows why. Nobody knows where that came from. They can't tell you. They can't fix it because they don't know where the bug is. And that is what black box AI can do. It's so powerful. It's miraculous. It's amazing. If you haven't tried it, go mess with ChatGPT. Tell it to give you a 5-paragraph theme about Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing or whatever it is, and it'll spit out something that seems so good, but it might also tell you that he was born in Tokyo in that theme, right? And oops. And so that's black box AI. We build technology that you can trace every decision, because especially in a space like healthcare, my gosh, you need to have 100% conviction that what it's doing is correct. And if you ever make a mistake, you need to be able to go figure out why and fix it. So I'm super passionate about solving that problem. We do it in defense, we do it in healthcare, we do it in finance, anywhere we can, and I hope to change the whole world's opinion of how AI can be used safely.
So where in your experience do you think are the biggest areas in healthcare right now where you think this sort of transparent AI would be the most beneficial?
Well, I mean, it's weird to be diagnosing healthcare from the outside, because I think the question there is, where does healthcare need the most help, right? Sure. Because we have this overwhelming problem with entitlement spending in the US, right? And where does that come from, and how are we going to solve it the next 4 years before suddenly there's no money for healthcare? It's not going to be the small businesses that are paying payers more, and it's not going to be, or insurers, I should say, and it's not going to be the providers. They don't have any more money. You might have heard most providers are losing money right now. So yeah, it's a mess. So I would say any place that we can do provable upstream interventions would be a great start, which takes cohort management and data, and then being able to explain to risk, whoever else, yes, no, for sure, I can prove to you, if we can just have this one group therapy call, it's going to save you this many ED visits for this person, right? And we're able to do that now. So I would say upstream is the place I think about a lot. in general, any place that we can help the most expensive decisions be made more quickly and safely, I would say, and that's a lot of the time that's providers making decisions. I don't know, you tell me. Where are your problems? Let me try to solve your problems.
Well, I mean, I think some of the problems right now, I mean, you know, everyone in here is going to have a different opinion, but I think, you know,
But yours is correct. So what's your opinion?
Did my wife hear that? Did you hear that? My opinion is correct. Right? Thank you again, Mike.
And we're done. Thanks, everybody.
We're good. Bye-bye. I mean, I think that, you know, given that we're a data and analytics company, you know, I think what we're focusing on is how do you get the most cost-effective solution? Mm-hmm. How do you increase access to needed and necessary care on demand? And how do you ensure that that care, regardless of where it is provided, or even what modality provides it, how do you ensure that those quality outcomes are going to be similar to if you were getting care in person? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the issue. You know, telehealth has obviously been a mode by which we can deliver care, and we can deliver care on demand when it's needed. But the question now is, can it be cost effective, and can it have outcomes that are on par with in-person care? Those are seemingly the concerns. Now, my answer, of course, would be absolutely. We've done this research, we've done this analysis, sure. But in the field, when you're doing it, how do you think AI can be incorporated to help with that?
Got it. Well, let me talk a bit about how AI is used in marketing. And that's a place where black box is just fine, because if you show me a Walmart ad, you know, and I'm not going to buy that thing, it doesn't hurt anybody. But boy, can we do individually tailored models very well in advertising, and that's what you get all the time. Fortnite is basically a casino in some regards, in that it's figuring out how much are you willing to spend and then trying to... Fortnite's probably not a bad one, actually. There's some mobile games that are just evil, where I'll get an ad that says, hey, for $7.99 you can get 100 coins, Mike, but you got to do it in the next 10 minutes. And you'll get one that says $9.99 for 200 coins, because it knows you're a bigger spender. And so it's tailoring you, and it knows that if I ask you at 5 o'clock, you'll say no, but if I ask you at 8 in the morning, you'll say yes, right? So that's that sort of tailoring. Super evil, by the way. Don't like it. It's part of why I'm not in video games anymore. But that's what we need in healthcare. We need to know that for you, a telehealth appointment is going to make the difference. Not just generally by a class, 70% of patients see a reduction in use of further more expensive intervention, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And we can build those kind of models. And then we need to be able to trust that that model's correct. And that's the part where it being a black box and it says, I don't know, try 30,000 calls today, which your black box does, is going to ruin any sense of trust of that model. Mm-hmm. So you need to have something that's like, I know how he works, and this will help you, and here I can prove it, and the math is all there, and that's, AI is actually really good at that level of personalization. Mm-hmm.
Well, another issue, and this seems to be a kind of a current trend at the moment, that the desire to use certain AI, I'm going to say categories, so, you know, like recurrent neural networks, to classify populations and then ascertain risk. So substance abuse, behavioral health issues are a major, major concern, particularly amongst adolescents. And so there's the need to really see, can we use AI to look at social media, to look at trends across the country, to look at past medical histories of individuals, to look at patterns that are determined by social risk factors, and can we then come up with sort of an accurate determination of risk? So we look at a population of adolescents, we look at their whatever social media they may have, we assess what those social risk factors are, we look at the past history of that particular community, and we say there's the risk factor of these kids being addicted to drugs or abusing substances, or they have severe mental illness, and we create the intervention before it gets to a point where it's exacerbated, where it's not only incredibly expensive, but the quality outcomes are very poor. How do you think, and what kinds of AI do you believe would be very beneficial in that arena?
Well, I mean, these are really big problems, right? And it starts with data collection. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, and the data side for techniques like RNNs needs tons and tons and tons of data to be able to try to pull out a signal, which, and then it may or may not be correct, but it needs all that to work with. And I don't love that approach to AI because the more data you're gathering, the less of that data that's going to be applicable to the cohort you're trying to look at, right? So if you do nationwide, what do 15-year-olds do? That is useful information for making prediction, but it's nowhere near as good as saying, what do kids in Richmond who are male, who are 15, do? How do I predict from that smaller cohort? But you get to the point where there's not enough data like that, so therefore I can't do this. And there's two reasons you don't have enough data. One is it doesn't exist, and two is you're not allowed to use it. So one of our lead product in market is a synthetic data solution where you cannot ever possibly re-identify once you've de-identified patient data. Because de-identification is data deletion, right? If you go in and delete stuff, you are removing data from a set, it's losing value, and then there's been a million horror stories about people just going and re-identifying it. I have to tell this horrible story about a company that came to us. It's a behavioral health analysis company where they do, it's like $5,000 for this really useful report they'll generate for you, and you give them all of your behavioral health data, HIPAA covered. They give you an analysis, send you back the analysis. They take the data, they de-identify it secretly when they're at a lab. They haven't broken any rules. Now they have the de-identified data, put it on the other side of a firewall at this other company. They totally own the rights to it now, and then they re-identify it all immediately, next day. Phone cards, credit cards, who was buying Starbucks next to the psychiatric health center, blah, blah, blah. They have 30 million fully identified behavioral health lives, cradle to grave, right now, that they sell to the highest bidder. That system's kind of broken. The good news is you could actually solve the problem you're talking about. The data exists now. Hey, I got enough data about Richmond. You just have to buy it from someone horrible, because the actual good guys would never be able to gather that data because you're not allowed to do that, because that's wrong. So what we're trying to solve is being able to trust that once we have generated a data set that's fully synthetic, now we can use it as part of one of these studies, because I think that's crucial, to have data that's accurate, that you trust, that doesn't accidentally give someone's entire life of medical history to, let's call it, a bad actor. Right, so first we have data, and then once you do that, hopefully you don't need so much, and then we have this other entire problem of getting people to believe it. And that's what I care so much about, is this notion of, okay, you did everything correct, but can I really trust that your AI is right? Because it doesn't match what I think. So we did work in commercial real estate, where it's $100 million decisions, and defense, which are a different kind of decision that's also very critical. And that is, I think, the place where hopefully that kind of technology will trickle down into healthcare, so that you've got the same level of conviction when it tells you what to do with a 15-year-old boy from Richmond. When you see him searching for ibuprofen online, it probably means he's a suicide risk. And we know that because that's what people in Richmond do, but it's not at all what people in Los Gatos do, ... I'm making that up, obviously. Then now we can act with conviction. And spend money, because what we're talking about with upstream intervention is spend money. It's just, is it smart money?
So I want to go
This
back
is
to
really not video games at all. So if you want to talk about video games?
Well, I want to go back to an issue you and I spoke about when we were doing our introductory call, and your sort of deep dive into synthetic data, which is a big trend right now in data gathering and data use. Can you can you explain to people what synthetic data is, why you believe it's so important, and how valuable it can be?
Sure. So, a good example is, Tesla doesn't have billions of road miles to train their AI, so they generate lots of fake road miles. Literally, for a while, they were using Grand Theft Auto 5. And so they would take images out of Grand Theft Auto 5, but my Tesla is perfect and never makes mistakes. I don't understand. Yeah, it makes mistakes all the time, and this is part of why, because it's built on hundreds and millions and billions of generated video that's synthetic, because they needed more than they could get. And they're getting more and more all the time. A lot of cars now are sending them video data, and that's helping them get smarter very slowly, but it's getting better. So that's synthetic data, right? And in the healthcare space, at least, most folks just de-identify data somehow, scratch off the serial numbers and say, now we can use this safely and not leak information. Unfortunately, the risk of re-identification is very high. something like 80% of us right now, Google has our position. Either it's an Android phone or you have Google Maps in the background or one of those other things. And once you have 2 or 3 locus points for a person during the day, there's not a lot of folks going to your house and coming to this conference and going to your office. Yeah, I can narrow you down pretty fast. So the other way to do synthetic data is to learn the data set so well that you could then make up fake data points within that knowledge space, and that's what we do. So like you tell us enough about the admissions yesterday at MUSC, and then I can make you a new data set with as many points as you want, and if you looked at it and said, what's the average age of a post-COVID patient who has, I don't know, a benign meningeal tumor over the last week, it would give you the precise answer. And it would be the same answer from the original news set, except all these people are completely made up. It's just the statistics are all the same, but there's no way to go back to the original because there's literally no relationship between the two. That's synthetic data, as opposed to de-identified data, which is the same people, maybe, instead of Michael Capps, it's Mike Chaps or something, but you can kind of figure out who it is. That's sort of the techniques most people use.
So, given your experience in this area, what are like 2 or 3 of the more exciting trends or exciting things in AI right now that you think really could be very beneficial over time for healthcare? I really did not mean to stump you with these questions.
Well, you asked me for 3, so now I got to sit here and make a list.
Okay. You
in my
can do
head.
5. You can do 5 if you want.
So I do think that large language models like ChatGPT are fantastic for certain things. And the problem with a ChatGPT, again, if you haven't tried it, go read any article about it, the new Bing system, and it'll tell you, like, it's amazing and also scary and also bad. Google lost 10% of its value because of one of their demos, right? Like, what was that, like $100 billion or something they lost because their demo gave an answer that was wrong? So this is big stuff going on. But when you use a large language model that's trained on only data you know is correct, it does a pretty darn good job of helping you. So imagine it's just taking the surgeon's rough notes and doing what a nurse does by turning it into prose to fit whatever is required for reimbursement, and they've got an LLM behind it that's helping them do that. It's really good for that stuff. It's amazing for writing letters to people. Oh, it's so good at that, because then you just read it real quick. It's great for folks who don't have English as a first language, or even just don't have the Queen's English. It's fantastic for that. We've got a nanny from Panama. She has excellent English, but she's not going to form a letter to a government official as cleanly as it would do for her, and then again, she double checks. So there's a lot of things that can be done just with text generation that are stupid, boring jobs that you have to do because someone on the Hill said you had to, that I think it will just make life easier. So that's one. 2, every hospital provider type organization I speak to has a cloud for all sorts of really cool tools, and then they have data which isn't there. So like, man, if only we could put these 2 things together, we'd have access to these beautiful analytics tools, but we can basically only use it for things like how much square footage is in the gym, but nothing related to patients or outcomes or the business that they're in, right? So stuff like the tech that I talked about starts allowing them to move synthetic data into the cloud and skip the let's not worry about HIPAA stuff, let's break that chain, but it's enough now that we can start using these fantastic tools that everybody else in the world gets to use all the time, and they're cheap and easy and smart. We can start using those. So it's just like unlocking cloud for healthcare is going to be super powerful, because every kid you hire already knows how to use all those tools, and none of them know how to use your weird iron that's in a basement server room somewhere, right, that runs COBOL and Fortran. No offense, I'm kind of being mean now. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. We work with St. Jude, and boy, they have like this weird underground nuclear silo of hardware because they're so afraid. God bless them. Duke's the same way. They're so afraid. Anyway, so that's 2. I'm going to stop there. You said 2 or 3, right? I'll take 2.
Well, so I remember, I think it was about 2 years ago, I was sitting in a conference room with a number of people from a couple of organizations, big organizations, and the topic of AI came up. and it was talking about sort of the different models of AI, different applications, and I was talking about some of his prospective users, and I remember a couple of people saying, "This all sounds good, but I don't want to use it because it scares me. AI really terrifies me, and because of that, I don't think we'll ever be able to use it for anything that we're doing." So why does this scare people so much? And how do you think we get over that fear and show its applicability and how it could be really beneficial?
Oh man, I've been fighting fear of new stuff for a long time. I don't know if you remember back when comics were creating killers, and then it was talkies were creating killers, and then movies were creating killers, and then the internet was creating killers, and most recently it was video games were creating killers. And I think now TikTok is taking over as what's destroying our youth, and it actually is. Like, it's bad. We'll talk about that later if you want. Way worse than video games. I'm going to throw that out. Okay. So I'm in this really neat organization called the Data and Trust Alliance, and it's the CEOs of Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, CVS Health, and Diveplane. Super weird that I'm in it, but I helped build it, so I get to show up. And the fear they have of ChatGPT, where they're putting like corporate-wide banning on it. Google's already using AI. Everybody's using AI all the friggin' time. Your face recognition, that's AI. Is AI scary? Sure. So are gas ovens. Gas ovens are fucking scary. Why do I have a bomb in my kitchen? The answer is because it's convenient, right? It's super convenient, and it's a little cheaper than the non-bomb version, which is electrical, right? I was like, is that really a good reason to be using a wildly explosive bomb in your kitchen? Yes, because boy, it saves me $5-6 a month sometimes. I think of AI as the same way, where it's super powerful and super scary, but everybody's using it all the time already, and you just should use it for the thing it's meant to be used for. And it's great for facial recognition, and it's great for running an Expedia search. And by the way, they're doing the same thing where they're showing you prices that are not the same for each person here in the room because they are trying to make the most money for themselves. They're not your friend. What? Yes, they're not your friend. Neither is Google. Same thing. It says we won't necessarily show you the cheapest thing, right? And they're doing AI all the time and all of those things. And so I think that's sort of fear of the unknown, straight up crossing the chasm.
Movies like War of the Worlds and AI and Independence Day. I mean, I hate to say this, but I claim that movies kind of entertainment, I should say, exaggerates the dangers of AI.
Oh,
and
yes.
People are like, oh my God, this is really going to happen. Like, yeah.
It happened the other way in virtual reality. So that was my field. I was like head mounts displays in 1995, right? Yeah. And then there'd be a cool movie like Lawnmower Man or Disclosure. Anybody old enough to see Disclosure with Michael Douglas? And you're like, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to be flipping through the files from my house in virtual reality. It wasn't as good as that. Everybody got pissed off. And they're like, well, we don't want VR anymore. This is stupid. I thought I was going to have my own, Jurassic Park moment in VR, and it didn't exist. And now it actually is all of those things, but everybody is so disappointed that nobody's using it. It really is truly amazing. AI side, yes. Unfortunately, and we can I as little or as much time as you want on it, we should all be super duper afraid of it. Like, I am wildly afraid of the direction AI is going. I have a TEDx talk. If anybody wants to go look up TEDx Mike Capps and get scared about what AI will do, I am truly afraid of generally intelligent AI systems, but I'm mostly afraid of us developing them all in a way that nobody knows what's going on and nobody can trust it. Like, when you have a war games movie and the bad AI does whatever, like, I would sure prefer, who knows if we'll have a war games AI? Who knows if we will? But my God, I would like us to be developing AI in a way that you can debug it and fix it along the way, as opposed to the black box approach where who knows what it's doing or why, but man, it's super useful. Yeah. And so that's a big part of why I got into it. So yes, you should be scared, but you shouldn't be scared of Expedia. You should just be cautious, and you shouldn't be scared of ChatGPT. You should just be cautious. Use it in the right way.
All right. So let's do something a little lighter.
Okay.
Which is
it's an existential threat, man. I mean, use it more, but it's an existential threat. Which, like, I drove a gas car here today. I mean, it's the same thing. All right, sorry. Go ahead.
Why don't you talk to us about what your interest in healthcare is? How did you get interested in it? You know, we all have stories about why we all decided to dedicate our careers in healthcare. You obviously went from this incredibly successful video game franchise to healthcare. So what helped you in that transition?
Oh, my dad built healthcare clinics when I was a kid. So yeah, I started early. My first functional planning exercise for a healthcare facility was when I was 14. So I was like, how many square feet do we need? How many patient beds should we expect over the next 10 years? That kind of stuff. So started early. At Scottish Rite, I put up the signs in the hallways for they use the stairs when there's a fire. I grew up in healthcare, and also, and I worked as in an accessioning lab. I learned how to be a phlebotomist when I was 16 because that requires no certification in Georgia. Thank you very much. And you literally just do it, and that's how you are a phlebotomist. Don't put that on my resume. And if anything, I learned from my dad, who ran reimbursements for 20 or 30 anesthesia groups, was don't go into healthcare. So that's why I'm not in healthcare. I think it's super important, hard problems, and helping Goldman Sachs make more money is lucrative for a company like ours, but it's not meaningful like healthcare is. And for us, defense is the same way. We care a lot about helping folks in uniform, and whether they are white uniforms or they are green uniforms. Right. These are huge problems for our country. So we try to help.
So what led you into sort of as Kathy has affectionately called me, I'm a huge data geek, which I don't shy away from. But how did you?
You're kind of a big deal, in fact. I can see it's
so
on your badge right there.
Well,
I did not get one of those. I'm just going to throw that out.
I'm a very big deal, yes.
Last time I come to MATRC. That's.
So what led you on the path to data, coding, programming? I mean, what sort of spurred you on to do that and sort of lead you to where you are now?
I've been great teachers when I was a kid. I had a third grade teacher in 1980, everybody does the math in 50, who had a TRS-80 in the back of the room and said, "You're smart, you shouldn't be learning fractions with us, you've already figured that out, why don't you sit here and program on this toy?" And it was amazing. So I sat and drew graphics on a TRS-80 in the back of the room. And that, which is, and who had a computer back then? Few did. So that was super cool. And then, I don't know, I always wanted to be a doctor. I figured out to not do that and became a doctor of computers instead. I don't know, I just stuck with computers as super interesting. A math degree, and I love it. I don't know what to say other than that. It's a maximization function that's so interesting to me. That's why I love video games, is you're trying to solve for cultural zeitgeist. Right. Also, this super hard computing problem, and also fantastic creative art. It's super fun. So I loved working in that intersection.
Very nice. Well, we're almost at after 12:30 now, so I do want to open this up.
How much did you guys pay for? I can't remember.
Sure. I don't get anything. I get a free lunch.
I got coffee. Yeah, I got coffee. So.
But let me open it up to this group here. And if anyone has any questions, please stand up and feel free to ask.
I'll run the mic over to folks, but we do have a question that was submitted online. So we're seeing AI being used to do primary readings and assessments for imaging studies, especially those done on scale with hundreds of thousands of images. Some providers view it as a competition, and others feel it can help them focus on the positives identified by AI rather than review all the studies that mostly are negative. Outside of the vendor testimony, how do we trust new iterations of healthcare AI?
Okay, a lot of stuff in there. So starting with, should you feel a competitive pressure? My God, yes. If your job is to determine whether a mole is cancerous or not, find a new job. Like, a phone can do it better. Not a phone connected to the cloud, but literally a phone can do that better. It'll do it more accurately, faster. Like, I'm sorry, but it will, because it's got more pixels in its camera than you have rods and cones in your eye. And so then the only thing you have that it doesn't is experience, but it's going to have a larger number of things it's seen. So all that's left now is that model built well? is it accurate? And I bet if you back tested my dermatologist and her quick body scans versus a phone, really tested, I bet that the phone is better. So like, yeah, it's kind of like if your job is writing thank you notes. My son wrote all his thank you notes to his grandma and grandfather with ChatGPT, and he'd say, tell her how much I liked the whatever, but I already had one. Like, why did you write that? And include a Harry Potter joke. And it did a great job. A really good job, except for one time the joke didn't make any sense. He's like, can you do a different joke? And sure. And it did it. Like, if your job is to write thank you notes on behalf of an organization, just like if your job is to be a journalist, you're probably not going to have a job anymore because that stuff's better. I mean, there hasn't been a baseball story written about a baseball game for like 14 years because that got replaced by AI years and years ago. He just looks at the box score and then generates 4 paragraphs. That's not by people anymore, and you'll see more and more of that. And so, yes, in parts of healthcare, especially image identification, it just does not make any sense to have a fallible human be doing it because, well, I can't trust the AI. Unfortunately, I think it makes more sense to have an AI read the MRI. They don't get tired. I've seen it. We built a system once for crossover in genetic analysis for GMOs and crops. And they had PhDs, because that was the law, reviewing a bunch of plots scattered for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. And they all hated it, right? What awful job to sit there in a circle and say, this is fine, this is not fine, this is fine, this is not fine. And they said, can you make an AI that matches them? And I said, I don't think we're going to do that. And sure enough, we figured out that they were 92% accurate. By the way, the law in Europe is 98% accurate, but they had never tested because they didn't want to test, right? So they're 92% accurate. Within a week, we had something that was 95%, and then we got to 99% accurate in like another 3 weeks. So it was better than a fleet of 22 PhDs in microbiology doing this, no, it's genetic biology doing that, because they're people and they get tired and they're not really good at it at 12:30 and they're really bad at it at 5 o'clock on Friday. Okay, so back to that. Should you be threatened? Absolutely. Just the same way as I wouldn't tell your kids to go into a field like that that can be so easily done by AI. How do we trust it more? It's gonna have to be a whole lot of studies, but I think practicality has to play a role, and especially when you talk about rural telehealth. I mean, our rural ain't so bad compared to the rest of the world. There's a whole lot of people just in the country to the south of us that don't have a dermatologist anywhere. And if I had the choice between having a phone app that were free, which by the way, they exist and they're doing it, versus waiting until you get a qualified MD who's had the specialist, oh my God, this isn't a hard question at all. There you go, whole lot of opinionated crap from a video game guy.
Good, I can get more.
Yes!
So, Mike, one of the things we've run into is that clinicians, particularly doctors, have 2 problems with AI. One is they're worried about being replaced, which you just talked about with radiologists, and they're afraid of the black box. So with respect to the black box, can you talk about things that we could do to have them embrace AI more? And I'm thinking auditing both the model development and the model output, other things in terms of having clinicians, work with the data scientists, but what other things can we do to make models more transparent and explainable?
Got it. I mean, I think that first one's just natural, right? And you see the same thing in specialties where they make it so hard for folks to get into the specialty. So you have a bunch of 65-year-olds in a specialty and nobody new coming into the specialty to protect, but that's gonna blow up in the specialty's face soon, right? So there's kind of 2 answers to this. One is if you're using standard off-the-shelf black box techniques, how do you increase confidence? And it's a whole lot of testing. It's a whole lot of saying like, well, if I have nothing else, how do we at least say I'm comfortable launching this knowing what could go wrong? Again, it's that idea of using AI and being aware of its limitations. If you use Google to search for a flight, be aware that it might send you in a direction that's better for Google than it is for you, but still use it because it's great. It's way better than you calling every airline. And so I'd say the same thing for black box models. I'm a huge advocate for models where you can transparently view what's going on and have that development cycle. I mean, I come out of software engineering where you write software and then it ain't done yet. and you test it some, and when it doesn't work, you trace back to why, and then you go, here it is, I finally found the bug, and you fix it, and you test it again, and you do that over and over again until it's good enough. And then you ship it, and it's called Windows, and it blue screens a whole bunch. But you tried really hard, and you had 1,000 smart people. And if you think about how hard the Windows folks tried to make software that never crashes, and how many people were working on it every day, and those are the same kind of engineers who are writing AI systems, except they can't debug it and fix it. So that's why I'm so passionate about making technology that debugs and fixes. That's why we're building it, and we will keep pushing our technology until somebody else has something better, and then we'll hop on their bandwagon and work with them. We'll open source it, et cetera. So I agree with you. It's an open process for building models, and then having the ability to go back and audit. I want to be able to go back a year ago and say, why is it that Mike didn't get the surgery? Because we were wrong, and he needed it. And you know what? The medical director who that pre-auth bounced up to probably would have said no as well. But he would or she would have also been wrong. The nurse who sent it to them would have also been wrong. And so how do we track what made that decision? And so we can go fix it so that never happens again, that somebody in that situation has this problem again. And I think that's the key to continuing to improve this tech. And there's not many technologies that do that. Most of them don't scale well. Our scales pretty well, but it doesn't scale as well as Bing and Google, because they're spending a couple $100 million per model to train those things. All right, so I think that's it. It's explainable techniques like we're focused on, because without it, you can't truly trust what's going on. We'll never be right. We could build a residential loan model from the last 10 years of data right here, and guess what? It's going to have some gender and racial bias in it, and it's not fair, but at least we can then go fix it, find it, and fix it, right? As opposed to not knowing what's going wrong with it. Okay.
You were answering part of my question.
Oh,
no,
that's okay. You could just say good job. I'll take that.
Well, I kind of I would love for you to continue, because it's just a short, but it's a two-part question. And the first part is, how does trust get written into AI, to speak to what you were just talking about? And then the second part of that is, how can you provide the need in AI for telehealth when a patient or the input does not know what the need is? So if it's not something visual where there's, what we expect our physicians to do is that troubleshooting, where does AI play in that role? And I'm sorry.
Gotcha. No, that's great. Okay. Remind me what the first one was. I've already forgotten it because I'm thinking so much about the second one.
How do you write trust?
Oh, got it. You can't. There's a whole lot of people who are philosophers who sit around talking about AI alignment, which is, does AI match with what humanity wants? Our friggin' website says keeping the humanity in AI. You can't, right? But what you can do is make something that can be inspected well and fixed, right? It's how the IRS works, is you can always look at the numbers of the double entry accounting of a company, and you can eventually find what's in there. So you don't have to trust the Lehman Brothers that they're doing it all correctly. It says all over the website, if you go look it up in the Internet Archive, about how they always, values first, mission first, whatever else. I didn't believe them. Nobody believed them. Turns out it was bullshit. But the point is, you can look in the accounting later and see what they did. And so I think that's how trust comes. It comes from transparency. And so you have to have systems that are transparent. And, 2 years ago, a big AI model had 160 billion decision nodes that are all mathematical functions. I don't have 160 billion nodes up here. I've got, 85 or 100 billion? I don't know. I've killed a lot of them with alcohol. But for the job. It was for the job. So I cannot possibly understand what it's doing. So therefore, I cannot possibly understand whether it's trustworthy or not. So you got to have something that works in a different way to be trustworthy. All right. And the second is, we are really far away from the human ability to understand how someone else is feeling. That's such a big problem. You guys are smarter than me about healthcare neurology, but the most difficult thing we ever do is try to do a model of what he's thinking in his head when I'm talking. So I'm simulating him in my head based on what I know, and looking at someone, and you just know they're sick, even though they haven't said it, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you can tell. We're a long way away from that. But what I can do on the other side is bring in all the context in telehealth that a doctor doesn't have. Because if they're lucky, they're doing 4 encounters an hour, but it's probably 6, right? They're walking in, quick check, they glance at the chart, somebody told them something. Well, I know how long it took between the time the Zoom popped up and they click the accept button, right, in the AI space. You can track all of that stuff, right? And it's all in memory all the time of when was this appointment supposed to be and when did you actually make it? Did you show up 5 minutes late? That is an indicator of something. And if I'm watching, I don't know, it's you again, I'm sorry, man. If I'm watching your behavior over 3 months and I notice that when you show up more than 5 minutes late for our psychology session, man, you got a lot of problems in my head, I'm sorry. When you show up 5 minutes late,
far off from
nice,
the truth.
nice. It is an indicator that you're heading towards crisis, because that's what happened the last 4 times. Man, what kind of relationship would you have to have with your GP? Even a concierge GP doesn't have that sort of insight, and we can hold on to all of that. So I think that's where the magic comes from, is all the external data points. But it's a long time before it can look at the camera and say, something's off. We're not quite there yet. We'll get there.
Okay, we have almost another half hour, and we have questions stacking up online and in the room.
Half
so I'm
hour?
going to,
Holy smokes. Okay.
I'm going to start.
You're kind of a big deal.
I'm going to need some beer. All right.
15 minutes. I'm sorry. I thought it was 1:15. Okay.
All right.
So-
That I can handle.
What does this mean for the next generation of children? At this point, they won't have to critically think or build basic skills if ChatGPT does it for them scary.
Oh, yeah. So I have an 8-year-old and 9-year-old, and people always ask, what are you telling your kids to do when they grow up? And I say, watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, because in that world, everyone's nice and everything's provided for you. You don't have a job unless you want to, because I hope that's what it's going to turn out to be. The other is that we all work for the AI overlords. I guess you watch Terminator Salvation or something. It is really hard because, let me give you an example. 6 months ago, I would tell everybody, oh, you should have your kids learn to program, because we'll always need programmers to build these systems. One of the things ChatGPT 4 did, they announced it yesterday, was it wrote a piece of code to hack into an organization by itself, and then it called someone by itself on Fiverr to say, hey, can you fill in this are you a human or a robot thing CAPTCHA for me? And the Fiverr person that it was paying said, oh, but you're not like a robot, are you? Ha, ha, ha. And the guy said, the robot said, oh, no, of course not. I just have a visual impairment, and I can never do these things, and I always get it wrong when I hear the speaker. And so the Fiverr guy was like, okay, and did that for it so that it could log in and then proceeded to attack the system. And every line of that code was written by ChatGPT 4 by taking all the code in the world and crushing it down into a little box and then spitting some code out, and it worked. So just like the journalist who takes a box score from a game they didn't see and generate 4 paragraphs, it's going to be the same with coding pretty soon. Like 80% of code right now is being written by versions of chat in software organizations, because you start writing if, and it fills in the then and the parentheses and all that, and just does it all, because it's always the same stuff. So what do you tell your kids to learn? I have no idea. I really do not know. Then it was creative. Let's be creative. But you know what? I'll say 5 years before I can log into Netflix and describe the movie I want to watch, and it makes it for me in real time for just me. Right? It's seen all the other movies I've liked, and luckily they've paid for the rights to Steven Seagal. And so I can say, I want a Steven Seagal action flick, but I want a little romance. I love Reese Witherspoon, and they've also paid for her rights, and poof, it jumps out a 2-hour movie, and somewhere along the way I was like, I really don't like the direction this is going. Can we have maybe a little bit more action, a little less kissy? No problem. Chat interface, you just talk to it. This isn't crazy at all, because it's happening right now. People are generating 5-minute movies with a chat prompt. It's a noir movie, it's set in Tokyo, the protagonist looks like this, and it just generates it. And that's right now, first versions. So being a creative, like the most powerful, best creatives in the world can make the things that ChatGPT could never imagine by synthesizing what we've already created. But man, it's going to be so tailored. It's going to be hard to say I'd rather watch the next Jim Cameron movie, which parts of it were kind of boring, but it was very clever, which I think applies to all of them, versus Steven Seagal and Reese Witherspoon finally entangled in bed the way I've always wanted it. Like, it's going to be hard for me to turn that down. That's not my fantasy. So that's the problem. So then I don't necessarily think creative is better either. And then I'm like, well, if it's not creative and it's not code, then it's going to be physical things that the AI can't do. And you can think of what those might be. Hands-on healthcare is a big one. It's going to be a long time before Da Vinci robots are doing the surgery themselves. It's not that far away. It's coming. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's not dystopian, right? It's good, right? It's good that none of us have to be creative anymore. And that our kids don't go outside and play anymore. They just watch TikTok videos in 10-second increments that are designed to capture their attention for as long as possible. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's good.
Let's move on to a new question.
Just think of it as making people be comfortable on a screen, and it really helps telehealth to grow because they won't want to interact with people face-to-face anymore.
Well, I'm still stuck on these, curated movies.
Nice.
Because I know a lot of people out here, and I'm like, I can imagine the movies you all are going to think of.
Stories is easy, right? Literally go into Bing, the new Chat GPT version of Bing, and say, I'd like a short story about. I own a role-playing game company for like Dungeons and Dragons, and I do writing in that space. And we use it all the time for like, I don't know, what's in the house? And you're like, make a cool description of a house. And there, I have 2 paragraphs of house description, double check it that it's not crazy. And then we're like, that's great, throw it in. It's crazy.
I just know that when we get to that movie thing, that I'm going to see 10 different versions of Sleepless in Seattle.
Nice.
All right, go ahead.
If
It
it's
sounded
more than
pretty
5 years.
dystopian to me.
All right, sorry.
I have a question about the use of AI bots to summarize scientific articles. Is it possible to do a reasonably good job to have a bot go through, let's say, 100 scientific articles and create an annotated bibliography on a subject that is important and emerging, but for which there's a relatively small literature, so that you can produce summaries for people to quickly kind of get up to speed on what's known?
Yes, and do you remember what the system was? Was it Google who launched it? Somebody else? They Meta.
Meta.
Thank you.
Meta.
Yeah. So, what was it called? Yeah, but it was scientific literature specifically, and it was up for like a month before they realized. Unfortunately, people were using it in a way you shouldn't use black box AI, which is to trust it 100%. Now, if what you're doing is like, here's the 100 articles that are about, I don't know, blah, 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 stastoma, what's going on, you could probably do a pretty good job of summarizing, but people were using it to write their scholarly articles because it's a real pain in the butt to write those things, and so much of it is formulaic, and they pulled it. Is it possible? Yes. I think it's highly possible if you train it on a very curated set. And that makes a lot of sense to do that. I mean, this is going nuts in the legal field right now, where like all I want is to take anything related to South Dakota trust law and then get all that. And now let me start asking you questions like a brilliant South Dakota lawyer who's been practicing for 150 years and remembers what happened in 1832. Like that's super valuable and useful. You just double check it. So yeah, it's there, it's here. And there's companies springing up everywhere that are taking ChatGPT or Bard or others and just wrapping it with a handy interface to make it a little easier to use.
And the next question from online is, if we have improved detection from AI, are we talking about how AI systems could overwhelm the capacity of this system to handle that throughput?
I don't know what we're identifying, but yes. There's a pretty famous science fiction publication that shut off because they couldn't handle the number of submissions because it went from like 10 a day to 100,000 original stories a day. And those original stories were all ChatGPT, and there's no way ChatGPT, and there's no way to tell right now, was this really written or not, and they couldn't read them. So it's just shut down. I think you'll see this sounds scary, you'll see a ability to search internet pre-February 2023 that'll come up soon, because you'll try to read an article about, I don't know, what's something divisive, water levels rising in Florida, and there will be 100,000 new articles this month that were written by people who have a political agenda that are all highly realistic, and the search algorithm can't tell whether or not they are legitimate blogs or they are spam. And so your search result will be clouded with whoever is spending the most on this push. And so how does that apply to healthcare? I don't know. Great question. Yes, if we're detecting more things early and we don't have the ability to do anything about it, that will be frustrating, but hopefully that will just drive change, where we're finding things earlier, and we all agree that, gosh, if more people got a clinician to talk to this person for 15 minutes, it would save the government money, it would save the providers money, and this person would have a better outcome. Ideally, what we would do is not just say, well, now we're overwhelmed with requests. Ideally, we'd fix that, and we would put funding behind it to find effectiveness. Hi.
So we've spent a long time trying to figure out the digital divide, but there's always been a divide between rural and urban, right? And COVID exacerbated that whole problem. We didn't have internet, so you couldn't do telehealth, right? Because you got to have certain things to be able to do that. And is there a hope that maybe the data and the AI can help build that bridge between the two? I mean, you could overlay where you have internet with where you have telehealth with better health outcomes. I mean, is that a possibility that could sort of be a solution for some of our problems?
Now, we worked really hard to get $100 billion for broadband in rural approved. Was it last year? So has it not already? We don't have broadband everywhere yet? It didn't work? I'm teasing. Well, we got the money at least. Spent some time on the Hill working on that one. To me, that comes down to efficient use of resources, which is a hard planning problem, which is perfect for AI. That is, given that we have, I don't know, a cancer cluster in this town that's in this rural area, and here's the providers, what's the smart thing to do? And someone who had all the information could make smart decisions. We're going to have to move some people. We're going to have to add a clinic. We're going to have to, you're right, it's that notion, this is what it's going to cost. Here's what we can do with telehealth. This is what outcomes we'll get for that. These are practical decisions that seem very makeable by algorithm if you had all that data in front of you, of like, how good is it to do the phone version of the derm check versus the in-person, and is it worth the risk, and is it worth the price, all those things. So I hope so. At least it could say, like, given the resources we have, what's most effective, and then it can drive planning, which I think is the big thing, is being able to project out 5 years of population shift and medical advancements and the like, and say, where are we going to spend our money today to solve that problem tomorrow? So. And don't tell me you're trying to figure out how to cross the digital divide. You guys are super digital at Palmetto. You just talk like you don't know what you're doing. I'm just gonna. She's from my home state, so it's okay. I can say that.
And this will need to be our last question. How can we get AI to build a better diversity representation for populations less accessible in research? An example, skin color differences that are not accounted for in healthcare teaching.
Yeah, it's a great issue. So, I just heard the FDA approved the first drug that was tested solely on women for deployment with men, with no actual testing in men, purely based on synthetic data. So they had, similar drug classes that they had seen both genders applied and seen the results and how similar they were, and basically extrapolated based on synthetic data processing. So that's neat. For once, I get a drug that wasn't tested on men as opposed to the other way around. We face this problem in synthetic data quite a bit, where the data input is not representative of the level of quality you want on the output. And so we're able to help with bridging that. How we have 1,000 points, I'm going to keep using this gender divide, it's an easy one, 1,000 women in the study and 100 men. How do we solve that? Well, we can at least generate 1,000 men on the other side, so we can balance it out. It doesn't solve it. We can't solve it. We can do intelligent extrapolation. Man, what can we do? I mean, I'll go back to, since this is the reason I'm up here pounding this chair, is that if you build a model with some population, whatever it is, being able to see where it starts failing and then figure out why and fix it is the crucial bit. So we're able to, with an explainable model, say, I 100% know what to do with Jason when he's asking for this glaucoma stent because I've seen 30,000 people just like Jason. He's right in the middle of a cluster of 30,000 people who all got approved for this. And when you ask about Josie over here, I got nobody like Josie. I don't know what to do. Your AI should say, I don't know what to do. ChatGPT will say, you should send her to Tokyo. It'll just make something up, right? Or worse, it will say, absolutely give it to her or definitely don't. But it will have no reason to do so because there's not enough data. So what our tech can do is say, and tech like it, can say, I don't know. There's no cases in your data set that really tell me what to do. If you want an answer from me, go get more data like, what did I use, Kathy? I can't remember. Like Kathy, and put that in the system, and then ask me again. Otherwise, figure it out yourself, pal, because I cannot do it in a way with high conviction. I think that's all we should ask for from our AI. I didn't teach you how to do this. Will you please do it anyway? Is a really bad approach to AI in healthcare, right? And that's what black box AI does. So I'll say using transparent AI is the way to solve that gap between is the data sufficient for it to come up with a conclusion, and a lot of times that's underrepresented portions of the population. I'll say real quickly, we worked with a group, Harvard model. It's trained on Harvard population pre-COVID. And it's being deployed at Duke, which is a Durham population post-COVID. And you know, it might be right still. It's for septic morbidity production. It might be right, but it might be wrong entirely. How do you know? Well, you need to monitor it somehow and figure it out. And so we set up a system to monitor it and watch as this new different population's coming in, are we getting the right results? I think you should always be able to do that, double checking. There we go.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for the time today. I can honestly say that you make AI incredibly entertaining, which is no small feat, given the fact that, again, not everyone understands what AI is.
It can be dry.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Mike. We greatly
Had a
appreciate
blast.
it.
Thanks,
and
everybody,
hope
for
to see you
having
next
me.
year.
Yeah, of course.
No way. That's what she said.
I mean, you don't have to, but I'm just going to do boring housekeeping stuff.
Thank you all for sticking around. And Jason, if you want to pop the closing slides up. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we wrap up here. And thank you all for sticking to the end. This has been an exciting time and just hit on a couple of frequently asked questions. So next, where's the, there we go. Clicker is not clicking. There we go. So a couple of frequently asked questions before I get inundated with emails. All the PowerPoints that we have received in advance are already up in your app. So if you go to the sessions, there should be a files thing. Anything we received during the conference or they were revised during the conference, and we will get those up either tonight or sometime this weekend. So trust that. All the sessions are being recorded, and those recordings should be up in about 1 to 2 weeks. So you will get an email notification saying all the recordings are now available. So you just go back to the mobile app or your virtual site, and you should be able to get those recorded sessions. One little thing to give you a heads up on. So our luncheon keynote speaker, she was recorded, but she's given us the rights to keep the recordings up for a month, and then they need to be taken down. So if you want to, watch that again or share it with a colleague and watch it together, that's great, but you have a month to do it, and that will come down. Continuing education. So if you would like to claim CE, CME, all those E credits, there is a tab in your menu bar that says continuing ed or CME information, depending on if you're on the virtual platform or the mobile app. If you click on that, it'll take you to a PDF, and that'll give you instructions on how to claim your credit. So there's a link. You basically pick Matrix. You fill out a quick survey about the event. You say which sessions you attended, because we didn't give CE for every session, and it will automatically calculate how many hours you would get, and you can just print out your certificate. So it should be easy. If you run into any trouble or problems with that, there is actually an email to contact about that. All right, People's Choice Award. So our poster award goes to Amanda Hudgens for synchronous telehealth fatigue. Amanda, if you are here, come on up. And it was a great poster, by the way. So if you haven't looked at our poster, if you are not one of those people who voted, it's going to be available in your app, and please, congratulations. And she stayed. All right, our game winner is Stacy Wind. Are you in this room? Awesome. And you had a fierce competition with one other individual. I saw the score, the leaderboard bouncing back and forth for like the last 2 days. All right, we would like to acknowledge and just thank you all for being here, for sticking it out to the end. The AV company has been amazing, and they've been with us since probably the beginning of this conference, in 11 years now. Direct Travel folks for doing all our logistics and registration and all that other good stuff. Brian Dunn, who has so graciously done our photography, and there are a ton of you who are on the planning committee, and so I just want to acknowledge you guys, because there's no way I could have done this all by myself. Your input has been invaluable. So you should have gotten an alert and an email with the summit evaluation. Part of that summit evaluation is we are all into process improvement. Like anything that we can do to do better for next time around, we would like to do. But there is also on that summit evaluation an opportunity for you to join the planning group for next year. There are many, many, many committees that we have, and so we would love for as many of you all, if you have ideas, for speakers, if you have ideas for topics, if you have ideas for, let's try this new thing, we are all open for that, and just join a planning committee and help us out, because we always want to do a little bit better. All right, it's not over till it's over, so we do have a final raffle, but before I do that, we do actually are offering a couple of things post-summit for summit attendees. So we have the Community of Innovation Practice. You should have gotten an email about that even if you didn't attend that session. So it's part of our Leading Transformation track. We want to equip people. What we heard last time was, we leave a conference, we're excited about what we're hearing, and then we get back to the grind and we forget everything that we said we wanted to do at the conference. So what we want to do is give an opportunity for you all to kind of get prodded a little bit, right? You go back and you go, okay, well, next month we're doing a webinar on this topic, and we can convene with some of the people that we got excited about this topic about and kind of pick up where we left off, or at least get a little nudge. So the Community of Innovation Practice is open to the first 20 organizations that register. It really is going to go through design thinking and how do you communicate what you want to do with your C-suite and those kinds of skills. So if you want to bring a team together, so let's say you attended, you have 10 colleagues who didn't attend, all 10 colleagues are eligible to be part. You just have to sign up your organization to join that. So be one of the top 20 in, and you're in. The Innovate or Die session, for those of you who did that pre-summit, our speakers, Chick and Dan and Rebecca, have said, hey, we would love to do a 30-day follow-up with our group. So if you want to do a 30-day follow-up, did you actually apply what you learned? Here are some new skills and some ways to think about this. You can sign up for that as well, and we will get more information out to you about that. State meetings. This was a little bit of a mess this year because we had some states that only had like 3 people here and 10 people virtual, and other states that had 50 people here and 10 virtual. And we were trying not to do like virtual and everyone combined because it just didn't work well last year. But each of these states are going to have some follow-ups with state meetings and do more of an official state meeting where we have everyone virtually. So be on the lookout for some emails and information about when your state's going to meet. This is going to be like related to state policy issues, challenges, barriers, and we know that every state has different ones, and so convene, work with those people in your state, and this is really a time before we hit that cliff in 2 years to make some policy changes around telehealth so that you can do the job that you want to do. And we have, for those who stuck it out to the very end, our final raffles. And I hate this part because half the people aren't in the room and we have to do like 9,000 names. All right, so for our raffle, $100 Visa gift card. Do we have, Yale Harris, I know you're in this room. Woohoo! All right, 1 for 1. All right, for the AirPods donated by Amwell. Jeanette Allen, are you in here? Woohoo, 2 for 2. This is a first. What are the odds? Oh. All right. Well, with that said, thank you. There's lunch in the next room. That's grab and go, or you can stay and eat, however you want to do it. Thank you for being here.